team, Salford FC. We've been kicked out as expected, but the message remains: Gary Neville is a traitor.
It began with a chant. Gary Neville is a traitor, echoing through the chilly air of Salford, raw and defiant. What might have been dismissed as another noisy football protest instead revealed something deeper, almost poetic in its fury. On that patch of green turf, Britain's culture war leapt from headlines to grassroots, from talk shows to goalposts. Gary Neville, once the working-class hero of Manchester's terraces, now stands as a symbol of what many feel has gone wrong with modern Britain. A man who rose from humble beginnings only to be absorbed by the very establishment he once seemed to defy. To some, he is a success story. To others, a turncoat, proof that loyalty has become a relic in an age of ambition and self-branding. The intrusion of Britain First and the Salford Patriots onto the pitch wasn't just an act of disruption. It was theater, desperate, furious, and meticulously symbolic. The football field, that last sacred common ground, became an impromptu stage for the nation's disillusionment. It was as if the crowd itself were shouting not at Neville, but at an entire system that promised equality and delivered spectacle instead. In another era, this might have been dismissed as hooliganism, but today it feels like a warning that the anger simmering on the sidelines of British life is no longer content to stay there. When patriotism storms the pitch, it tells us something fundamental, that the real contest isn't between Salford and Oldham, but between the forgotten and the celebrated, between the hometown and the headline. And perhaps that's why the chant hits so hard. Gary Neville is a traitor isn't merely about football. It's about the betrayal of belonging, the moment when a nation realizes that even its heroes have changed teams.
Well, this whole saga is because of the Labour government's obsession with having to do a trade arrangement, trade deal, whatever you want to call it, with China. So the spy saga, where these people were meant to be prosecuted, collapsed. We now know quite a lot of detail why it collapsed, and a lot of that is to do with the Labour government's behaviour with the Crime Prosecution Service. What actually happened was that they were required to hand a continuance notice, really, to the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, and also the CPS, and that all that was required as a result of a case that had happened just before was that they needed to say, essentially, that China posed a continuing threat. They didn't do that for 4 months. They got bogged down in just not answering the CPS. Finally, in the end, they put together a series of notes, didn't meet the requirement. And worse than that, we now know from the documents released, they actually just pulled something out of the Labour manifesto, talking some nonsense about, deal with them in one way or the other. Complete idiocy. It had nothing to do with the case. And that was their way of saying basically they didn't want the prosecution to go ahead. And so the CPS decided they couldn't proceed with this and they dropped it. Now, you can argue the CPS might have made more effort to go and do it, but the truth is the government should have gone hard on this and made it very clear China's a threat. And they're so desperate desperate about upsetting the Chinese, that's really where the problem arose. And now we've got the embassy now, this ridiculous super embassy, which will have another 200 spies threatening lots of British citizens, myself included. I'm sanctioned by the Chinese government, but also a lot of Hong Kong dissidents who have fled, and we've got these illegal police stations. Government doesn't do anything about it. So it's a complete mess. It's the biggest threat we face since the ending of the Cold War, is the growth and power and threatening nature of China, both in China and externally.
That's a really interesting comment, and that's something that we were actually talking about on this show last week. It feels to me, and like we're talking a lot about the Middle East, we're talking a lot about the threat from Russia, but it doesn't feel like we are serious enough about the geopolitical threat from China. Do you think that's reasonable? And if so, how do we raise the alarm more around what could be a very serious situation in the Taiwan Strait before the decade is out?
Yeah, well, let's just deal with what China actually does and who it's allied with. I mean, right now, I would call it the axis of totalitarian states are all in league with each other. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran are the key players in this, but there are others like Myanmar, which has got this terrible regime involved. Now, China internally is unbelievably brutal. It practices wide-scale slave labor. We buy products over here, particularly solar arrays, that are made using slave labor. They're carrying out what I believe to be a genocide in Xinjiang, where they take the men and they're put into slave labor camps, millions of them, and also they take the women and forcibly sterilize them. The birth rate in Xinjiang has gone off the edge of a cliff. And the young children are taken to re-education camps where they learn to be Han Chinese, not Uyghur. So they have to stop using their own language, they have to start speaking essentially in Mandarin, and at the same time learn all about what it is to be a Chinese citizen. But they do the same in Tibet. There's 250,000 men have gone into slave labor in Tibet. They're doing it now in Outer Mongolia, which is a part of China. So it goes on. So that's just what they do in China. They're threatening Taiwan. But the main thing is, just think about this for a second. Russia could never have invaded Ukraine had they not had the backing of China. China finances Russia at the moment. It buys huge amounts of its oil and gas. It makes sure that they're not short of weapons. It did the rapprochement with North Korea. North Korea now provides millions of artillery rounds and everything else they can provide, small arms, etc. They've even got 10,000 or so troops sitting in that war as well. Then you've got Iran. Iran's been supplying them with massive amounts of these drones. Also, you have to say that the whole attack in Gaza, I believe, was partly due to taking the pressure off Russia, where Iranian backed militias actually brutally, in case of Hamas, attacked and murdered a couple of thousand Israelis and took a lot of prisoners. And the point is that all of that started, I believe, as part of this incredible support network for Russia, which is at the heart China. Now, one last point. China now has about 130 times the capacity to build naval ships than America does and Europe. And any one shipyard in China at the moment builds more naval ships than the whole of the United States. You tell me we aren't seeing the development of a threat right in front of us, and all we want to do is get on bended knee and kiss the backside of China. That seems to be the Labour Party policy.
When Ian Duncan Smith sneered that all Labour want to do is get on bended knee and kiss the backside of China, it wasn't just a jab at Keir Starmer. It was an accusation that Britain itself has lost its moral spine. Starmer's cautious handling of the China spy scandal reflects a nation torn between principle and pragmatism. To critics, it looks like weakness. To allies, like calculation. Yet in a world where trade trumps truth, even restraint feels like surrender. Duncan Smith's fury exposes a deeper fear that Britain no longer stands firm on values, but bends quietly to power.